Have you ever wondered how political funding works in India? Well, a large part of it can be traced to a financial instrument known as the electoral bond. Introduced by the Government of India in the year 2018, electoral bonds have marked a significant shift in the landscape of political funding. So, what exactly are electoral bonds? Simply put, they are a means for individuals and corporations to donate funds to political parties. These bonds can be purchased from specified branches of authorized banks during certain periods and are available in a variety of denominations. But here's where it gets interesting. The banks that issue these bonds also maintain the anonymity of the donor. That's right, these bonds are bearer instruments, which means they're not registered in the name of the purchaser. The purpose of these bonds is to increase transparency in political funding by channeling donations through formal banking channels. By doing so, they aim to curb the use of unaccounted cash in the financing of elections. However, as with any significant change, electoral bonds have not been without their share of criticism. Some argue that they could potentially lead to increased opacity in political funding and favoritism. The issuance and redemption of electoral bonds are governed by specific regulations laid out by the Government of India. They are overseen by regulatory bodies such as the Reserve Bank of India and the Election Commission. Since their introduction, electoral bonds have played a role in political donations. However, the extent of their impact on transparency and electoral integrity is still a matter of debate. In conclusion, electoral bonds represent a novel approach to political funding in India, aiming to strike a balance between anonymity for donors and transparency in the electoral process. But as with any new system, ongoing scrutiny and evaluation are necessary to ensure they truly fulfill their intended objectives. Electoral bonds hold a significant place in the Indian political funding landscape. And as we move forward, their role and impact will continue to be a subject of extensive study and discussion. Electoral bonds, introduced in 2018, are a new addition to India's political funding mechanism. These are not your typical bonds. They are financial instruments designed to allow both individuals and corporations to make donations to political parties. Now you might wonder what makes these bonds special. The distinct feature of electoral bonds is their anonymity. Unlike traditional bonds, these are bearer instruments. This means they do not carry the name of the purchaser. Instead, they are issued by authorized banks, which maintain the secrecy of the donor's identity. In terms of denominations, these bonds are available in a wide range, allowing donors to choose according to their contribution capacity. All transactions related to electoral bonds are carried out through formal banking channels. This is done to promote transparency and curb the use of unaccounted cash in political funding. These bonds are a means for individuals and corporations to make political donations. The functioning of electoral bonds involves a series of steps. It all starts when an individual or a corporation decides to support a political party. They approach a specified branch of an authorized bank during a designated period to purchase an electoral bond. These bonds come in various denominations, providing flexibility in the amount of donation. But what happens after purchase? Well, the donor can then give this bond to a political party of their choice. It's important to note that these bonds are bearer instruments. This means they are not registered in the name of the purchaser. The anonymity of the donor is thus maintained, providing a level of privacy to those who wish to support political causes without public disclosure. Now, the political party receiving the bond can only encash it through a designated bank account with the authorized bank. The funds are then credited to the party's account, completing the process of donation. The idea behind this system is to ensure that all political funding goes through official banking channels. This adds a layer of security and accountability to the process, reducing the scope for unaccounted cash transactions that have been a major concern in election financing. However, it's not just about buying and giving away these bonds. There are specific regulations that govern the issuance and redemption of electoral bonds. These regulations are laid down by the Government of India, and the entire process is overseen by regulatory bodies like the Reserve Bank of India and the Election Commission. So, from the moment an individual or entity decides to buy an electoral bond to the moment the funds reach a political party, there are multiple checks and balances in place. This system aims to bring more transparency to political funding while maintaining donor anonymity. This is how electoral bonds work, from purchase to redemption. They represent a unique approach to political funding, one that seeks to bring a balance between transparency and privacy. But like any system, they are subject to ongoing scrutiny and evaluation to ensure they are serving their intended purpose. Electoral bonds aim to promote transparency in political funding. This objective is achieved by channeling all political contributions through formal banking channels. This not only ensures a paper trail, but also reduces the scope for under-the-table transactions, thus enabling a cleaner and more accountable election financing process. The bonds serve a dual purpose. On one hand, they allow donors to contribute towards their preferred political entities without fear of reprisal, courtesy of the anonymity they offer. On the other hand, they bring about an element of transparency as the funds are routed through authorized banks, which are mandated to maintain meticulous records. This system stands as a bulwark against the rampant use of unaccounted cash in election financing, a malpractice that has mired the political landscape in controversies and skepticism. In essence, electoral bonds are instruments that help curb the use of unaccounted cash in election financing. Despite their intended purpose, electoral bonds have faced criticism. The concerns span a range of issues, from the potential for opacity in political funding to the possibility of favoritism. The most common criticism is that while electoral bonds theoretically aim for transparency, they may instead lead to increased opacity. This is because the identity of the donor can remain anonymous, which means we don't know who is funding our political parties. This anonymity can potentially be exploited, leading to a lack of transparency about the source of funds. Another concern is that the anonymity of electoral bonds could lead to favoritism and crony capitalism. Critics argue that corporations could use these bonds to donate large sums to political parties in the hope of gaining favor. This could result in policy decisions being influenced by big donors, rather than being made in the best interests of the public. There are also concerns about foreign interference. Since the donor's identity is kept confidential, it opens up a possibility for foreign entities to donate to Indian political parties, which could potentially influence our domestic policies. Moreover, critics argue that the bonds may not necessarily curb the use of black money in elections. While the bonds need to be purchased through a bank, the money used to buy the bonds could still be unaccounted for. Hence, there's a risk that the bonds could be used to legitimize illicit funds. Lastly, there's a concern about the imbalance of power. If one party receives the majority of the donations through electoral bonds, it could lead to an uneven playing field, which contradicts the democratic principle of fair competition. These are some of the criticisms and concerns that electoral bonds face. It's essential to remember that while electoral bonds aim to reform political funding, they are not without their potential drawbacks. The challenge lies in striking the right balance between donor anonymity and transparency in political funding to ensure a robust and fair democratic process. The issuance and redemption of electoral bonds are governed by specific regulations. These rules are crafted by the Government of India, aiming to strike a balance between encouraging transparent political funding and protecting the privacy of donors. The Reserve Bank of India, the country's central banking institution, plays a critical role here. It oversees the entire process, from the issuance of these bonds by authorized banks to their redemption by political parties. Another significant player is the Election Commission of India. It ensures that the funds raised through these bonds are utilized in accordance with the Representation of the People Act, 1951. Thus, the regulatory framework surrounding electoral bonds involves a robust system of checks and balances. These measures are put in place to prevent misuse and uphold the integrity of the electoral process. These regulations and bodies ensure the proper functioning of electoral bonds. Electoral bonds have already left a mark on political donations. Since their introduction in 2018, these financial instruments have been at the heart of political funding, serving as a conduit for individuals and corporations to support their chosen parties. The bonds have undoubtedly streamlined the process of political donations, creating a formal channel that seeks to reduce the use of unaccounted cash. However, the future implications are still under scrutiny. Critics argue that while electoral bonds were designed to increase transparency, they may inadvertently cloak political funding in opacity. This is because the anonymity provided to donors can potentially be exploited, leading to favoritism and undue influence. Furthermore, the effectiveness of electoral bonds in curbing corruption and ensuring electoral integrity is yet to be definitively proven. As we move forward, it is crucial that the system undergoes continuous evaluation and improvement. The electoral bond's impact on transparency and electoral integrity continues to be a subject of debate.